The date was April 11th, 1970. At 2:13 in the afternoon, a Saturn V rocket tore off the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, carrying 3 men toward the moon. It was supposed to be routine. NASA had already landed astronauts twice before. The public was losing interest. Reporters called it just another moonshot. Nobody watching that launch could have imagined they were about to witness one of the greatest survival stories in human history. Commander Jim Lovell had already flown to the moon once before, on Apollo 8. This time he would walk on it. Beside him were Jack Swigert, a last-minute replacement after the original pilot was exposed to measles, and Fred Hayes, the Lunar Module pilot. Together, they were flying Apollo 13, a mission bound for the Fra Mauro Highlands. For 2 days, everything went according to plan. The crew joked with mission control. They broadcast a relaxed television tour of their spacecraft back to Earth. Few networks even bothered to air it. As far as the world was concerned, nothing interesting was happening 200,000 miles away. Then at 9:08 p.m. on April 13th, everything changed. Mission Control asked the crew to stir the oxygen tanks, a routine procedure to keep the contents from settling. Inside tank number 2, damaged wiring sparked. In seconds, the tank ruptured. A sharp bang shook the spacecraft. Warning lights flooded the control panel. Jack Swigert spoke the words that would define the mission. "Houston, we've had a problem."
Within minutes, the crew watched their oxygen supply bleeding out into the vacuum of space. One tank was already empty. The second was draining fast. The spacecraft that was supposed to carry them home was dying beneath their feet. On the ground, engineers in Houston stared at data that made no sense. Power levels were collapsing. Oxygen was vanishing. For a moment, no one understood what they were looking at. Then the truth set in. An explosion had crippled the main spacecraft, Odyssey, and its fuel cells were failing fast. Without oxygen, there would be no electricity. Without electricity, there would be no way to steer, no way to communicate, no way to survive re-entry. The moon landing was over. Now, the only mission was staying alive.
Lovell looked out the window and saw gas venting into space. It was his own oxygen escaping. He understood, faster than almost anyone, exactly how much trouble they were in. Back on Earth, Flight Director Gene Kranz gathered his team and gave an order that became legend. Failure was not an option. But the numbers were brutal. The command module had only minutes of power left. There was no way to fix it in time. So NASA made a desperate decision. The astronauts would abandon Odyssey and crowd into the Lunar Module Aquarius, a spacecraft built to land 2 men on the moon for 2 days, now being asked to keep 3 men alive for 4. Aquarius had barely enough oxygen, barely enough power, and barely enough space. Temperatures dropped toward freezing. Condensation formed on every surface. The astronauts rationed water to a few sips a day, growing dehydrated and exhausted as they drifted deeper into space, still heading toward the moon because there was no way to turn around. Their only option was to loop behind the far side, use lunar gravity to slingshot back toward Earth, and hope everything else held together long enough to get them there. Then a new danger emerged. Carbon dioxide was building up inside the cabin, and the air scrubbers that removed it didn't fit the new spacecraft. Engineers on the ground had hours to solve a problem that would normally take weeks. Using only the materials the astronauts had on board, plastic bags, cardboard, and duct tape, they designed a makeshift filter and radioed up instructions step by step. If it failed, the crew would slowly suffocate. It worked. It became one of the most famous improvisations in the history of engineering. As Aquarius rounded the far side of the moon, the astronauts became the most isolated human beings in history, utterly alone, with no way to call for help, no way to see Earth, and no guarantee they'd ever get back. When they emerged and fired the engine to speed toward home, every calculation had to be perfect. Too much power, and they'd miss Earth entirely. Too little, and they'd never make it back inside the atmosphere.
As they approached Earth, one final crisis awaited. The crew had to power up the damaged command module using only battery reserves meant for re-entry, hoping equipment that had sat frozen and inactive for days would still function. Millions around the world who had ignored the mission days earlier were now glued to their televisions and radios. For 4 minutes, as the spacecraft plunged through the atmosphere, all communication went silent, exactly as expected during re-entry. But this time, the silence stretched on. 60 seconds longer than it should have. Mission Control waited. The world waited. Then, static crackled, and a voice broke through. Odyssey had made it. Parachutes bloomed against the sky, and the capsule splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. 3 exhausted astronauts, who should have died in the freezing dark of space, came home alive. NASA would later call Apollo 13 a successful failure, a mission that never reached the moon, but proved something far more important, that human ingenuity, teamwork, and sheer refusal to give up could turn near-certain disaster into one of the greatest survival stories ever told.